but they don't prolong life and they don't protect against future heart attacks.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I haven't had a chance during the conference to check out what Michael Greger is posting. I think a lot of us follow his work, and that's very well said. What are other side effects that could happen after a person gets a stent put in?
Well, he mentioned it very clearly. You can die, you can have a stroke, you can have a heart attack, and you remember that you have to have anticoagulation for this during this period while the new endothelial cells are grown over the bare metal stent. And during this period, when you're anticoagulated, you can have a major bleed, either cerebral hemorrhage or gastrointestinal hemorrhage. So that it's not without risk by any means.
So along the same lines, and I've asked this question of Colin, and years ago, Colin and Dr. Kim Williams were on a panel together, and they were talking about statins, and I brought this up with many people about the efficacy of statins and whether or not they really work. And I get, Dr. Kim Williams still says absolutely they definitely work. We had Dr. John Abramson on. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He said that that it takes so many people over such a long period of time for them to prevent a single event, even with people who had a heart attack. So it's hard to tell. It's hard for the layperson to know whether or not they should take a statin. So I'll ask each of you, based on your understanding, your research, your experience, do statins work?
Hey, go ahead, S.
Well, there's no question that they work in terms of lowering your cholesterol, because what they do is they poison an enzyme system in the liver, the HMG-CoA reductase. But when the manufacturers of stent didn't like the idea of saying it poisoned the enzyme system, so they use a term called inhibit. It inhibits it seems it's a little bit more delicate when you use that word.
Sounds
But
better.
there's no question that at least the data that I'm familiar with, that stents can help. But you see, the problem with them is often patients, once they take a stent and they see that their cholesterol is plummeting and they think that this is really wonderful, and because it's right down in the area where they want it, and of course what happens, they don't ever talk about the food, so they continue to eat the same old Western diet, and despite the fact they've got these glorious numbers, the injury to the endothelium continues and their disease progresses, maybe not as rapidly. So you can say it maybe slows the rate of disease progression. But I think what to me is so disturbing about it, none of the drugs, none of the stents, none of the bypasses, as I said earlier, has one single solitary thing whatsoever to do with the causation of the illness. And as you have seen in the paper that I read earlier today, our results were 30-fold more favorable than the common ones that are seen out there. Why is there this difference? Because really there's been a basic covenant of trust since the days of Hippocrates that whenever possible, the physician will share with the patient what is the causation of the illness. And sadly today in cardiovascular medicine, that is simply not being done.
Any thoughts, Colin, on statins?
Yeah, I that's been kind of a favorite for me, and I wrote a book on it called Whole. That was after the John study, whether you saw that or not. But I taught for years in the biochemistry field, general biochemistry and pharmacology, biochemistry, and so forth and so on. So I've been fairly close to that concept of the complexity, of the body in regards to all the reactions that go on in so-called intermediary metabolism. And I mean, they're infinite in terms of the interactions they have with each other and with, they're standing alone. And so often what we've gotten caught up in, certainly in the area of nutrition, but I would argue too, also in the area of medicine, that we tend to want to focus on one observation or one event or one substance at a time. And it sounds kind of good. It sounds very professional and fancy, that sort of stuff. But when we look at one reaction that supposedly accounts for a very major disease, let's say, and then we're going to create we're going to find some chemical to treat that disease, very, very complex disease, and treat it and just hitting one reaction in that mixture. Just the odds, just looking at that, you can tell that the whole idea of using drugs to treat illness, in a sense, is what I call reductionism. Taking one chemical, in the case of drugs, it's not just taking one nutrient, you might see something there, but it's actually taking a drug with a synthetic derivative of a nutrient. And that's necessary because you can't patent nutrients, so you can patent, synthetic derivatives. And so that gets us into a very different ballgame. And I was making an argument in the book Whole, and the new book I'm doing is extending beyond that. I really have a problem with the way we think about causes and effects in this area that we might call medical science. When we look at one thing and just in isolation almost as if that is the answer, there's a big mistake, because nutrition, for a start, is not one thing at a time doing this thing, whatever it is. It's all the nutrients together that it comes from consuming the right food. And that's basically plants, a variety of that. And they work in these marvelous ways together. And to try to pick up one thing at a time and make some progress on it, or make claims about it, make some money on it, if you can. I really have a problem with that. And so I had used acid, I talked about this a bit. I've used a statin story at the time, because right at the time, they were just coming out in the late 80s, just the time I was working in this area. They're working with NIH to some extent. And they were just coming out with lovastatin, I think was the first one that they came out with at the time. And I got some pushback from the people in the heart disease area. The sort of, you're not experiencing heart disease, you don't know what you're talking about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just using only that example as an example of, because there's real data here to show that when we do it that way, one thing at a time, yeah, you can actually produce an effect. It looks maybe oppressive, especially with regard to that one event, but that doesn't speak for the whole concept of nutrition, which is, infinite numbers of nutrients and combination of nutrients and time-dependent reactions and stuff like that. It's an extraordinarily complex system. So I think we've tried to simplify science, especially biological science, down to one thing at a time, because our heads can't manage more than that. And so I think that what we have to do is to figure out a way, and I think there are some ways, to actually analyze cause and effect relationships, according to a grander scheme, if I could say it that way. Like whole foods, everything working together. And we did some research just on that point. And it turns out that, just to name animal protein for example, when it provokes cancer, it's very dramatic. And I started looking at to see, well, how does that work? And I was looking for the mechanism. So maybe you could have a drug to block it, if you will, something like the statins. And what I found over a period of, about 10, 12 years or so, with some students, each of them doing a thesis, every time we looked for a mechanism, we found one. And that's more or less true. And I ended up with a whole bunch of mechanisms, changing their activities when the disease comes along. Some of them increase, some decrease, but the end result was that they all do the same thing, the same, major effect. And that just struck me as really quite exciting, because when they all operate that way, and then you go to some other nutrients as well, or substance in food, and you find the same phenomenon occurring. I like to say Mother Nature, I think, knew what she was doing for millions of years, and fashioned that complexity. But it really works, and so we got to deal with the concept of complexity to really appreciate, and that's where nutrition comes in. And unfortunately, in my area, in nutrition, we tend to focus and do the same thing. We talk about individual nutrients, how much do we take, what do they do, et cetera, et cetera. And And so the same thing happens in medical practice, I think, or, those disciplines related to that. We like to think that we can find one thing to, explain our observation, if you will. We get into trouble when we do that, because then, especially when you start using that one thing with it's something that's synthetic, it's because we want to get a patent for it. And so we're asking for trouble, a lot of side effects. Some of them are not so good. And it's just a different concept, I think, that we need to deal with and discuss. And
Michael, I would like to make a comment about a patient, if I may.
Absolutely.
The oldest patient that I ever started on our program was 87, and he'd been told that he had to have bypass surgery, but he was convinced that as frail as he was, when they sawed him in half for bypass surgery, he was convinced that he wouldn't tolerate it. He would die. So he wanted to go plant-based, and he became a wonderful patient. And he was from California, and every year he would call, giving me an update on how he was doing. And about 3 years ago, when he called, he wanted to speak with Ann. And the reason was he was wanting to speak with Ann because he wanted from Ann multiple recipes because he's having a fairly large party. So Ann's curiosity said, well, could you share with me what's the party about? And he said, well, I'm celebrating my 100th birthday.
Wow.
Sure enough, that was 3 years ago. Well, 2 years ago, he called again to wanted to be sure to remind us that he was now 101. This year, when we got his phone call, he wanted to be sure to remind us that he was now 103.
Wow. How old was he when he came to you?
87.
87. All right. I mean, that makes me feel good that, it's really never too late to begin. If you can recover from heart disease at 87 and add another, 14 years or I guess that's 16 years of life and going is amazing and really inspiring. Now,
I might add to that, as S knows, we talk about it quite a bit. We're almost the same age. He's got me by 3 months. We're both 91. And, I know in my case, in my wife's case, together, I was sort of willing to take, move forward and start taking it seriously. At that time, I was in my early 50s. She was in her late 40s. A little bit too late. Some would argue that making change would make a difference. Well, she had cancer in her family. I had heart disease in my family. And so we changed our diets. Now I'm 91, 3 months behind S. He's 91. And Karen's still around with us. So she's 84. And I think, I don't know what Ann is, but, I think just between the four of us, S and I and our wives, I guess I should knock on wood. You probably shouldn't tell that story because you never know what's going to happen next. But I think we are, in fact, in a way, demonstrating a little something. Karen got diagnosed with advanced melanoma of all things, pretty serious, as S knows, and she wouldn't take any medication. And her caretaker got mad at her, and so she didn't take anything, and she did just fine with the melanoma. Got past it and through it.
Wow. That's inspiring. So S, when you began your research and you started doing that study, did you have any inkling that not only would it prevent the disease from getting worse, but it actually might reverse the disease?
I was hoping that would be the case, but I would have to say there probably was data that came from in the concentration camps in World War II, where those poor prisoners, all they were getting to eat was vegetable gruel. There was really quite an absence of coronary artery disease that was seen there. And also there had been some experiments done actually in dogs that showed that you could reverse the disease if you gave it to them first with a very high fat diet. But it was really yet to be seen whether it would help in patients who already had advanced cardiovascular disease. And what seems to happen, we probably really still don't know what is going on at the level below the cellular level. When you get into the actual discussion about biochemistry, when you take it to the nth degree, you're really talking more about physics and photons and things like that, which we really haven't really bothered to investigate as much as perhaps we should in the future. But the key, I think, is when you're eating whole food, plant-based nutrition, if you were to look at your inflammatory indices, for example, oxidized LDL, asymmetric dimethylarginine, myeloperoxidase, and HSCRP, and it's really quite fascinating that when you're eating plant-based, those inflammatory markers will be quite low, and you know that what you're doing is very exciting and very wonderful, and it keeps disease and illness from progressing, because we haven't talked about the side effects of whole food plant-based nutrition. People always say, what are the side effects? And I tell them, well, you get rid of your hypertension, you get rid of your diabetes, you get rid of the risk of stroke, you get rid of Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and multiple sclerosis, allergies, and asthma, and the list goes on. Medicine has never, ever